Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next part of our TOEFL lesson. I will be speaking about the speaking today. It is quite a complex section, so let me get on and show you some of the details. Okay, now I'm going to open to the section in the course. Okay, so important facts at a glance. First of all, it's, as I've said in the previous two sections, it is an academic test, so a high standard is expected, as in IELTS in Cambridge. If the student is below B2 level, then it is recommended that you spend time building their level up first before they attempt the TOEFL, because a lot is expected of them. Okay, and they're going to get very frustrated, especially in the speaking, if they cannot express themselves in the manner that's required. So, first of all, it's very important that they realize that their accent will not give them a lower mark. A lot of the students are very self-conscious about their accents, and they feel that they cannot get a good mark for an accent. The accent will not bring their mark down, but obviously in saying that, the way they pronounce the words must be clear. They must express themselves clearly, even if their accent is strong with their native language. Okay, so coherency, fluency, and the way they express their thoughts is the most important. And we will look just now at what will be assessed. So obviously, grammar and vocabulary are very, very important. But as I said just now, focus on the structure and the format rather than vocabulary and grammar. But encourage them to build their vocabulary as much as possible. Because of the academic nature, they need to be able to use academic vocabulary. Okay. So the speaking skills that are required, they must speak with self-confidence and fluency. I often say to them, even if they don't feel self-confident, they need to fake it till they make it. Because immediately when you're in a speaking test and you hold back, obviously it affects how you express yourself. So even if they're not feeling self-confident, they need to try and speak with self-confidence and with fluency. They must use the time. I will show you just now of how the way the time is set up. And they must, if they're required to speak for 60 seconds, as close to 60 seconds as possible. They're required to speak for 30 seconds, fill the 37 seconds. Time usage is obviously important, and that means the prep seconds before they speak as well. Making the most of the time that they're given. And there will be a timer on the screen. It can be a little bit off-putting for them and stressful, but practice with a timer, and some of my students have their timer on at the same time so that they get used to filling that time. That's one of the most important parts of the speaking, and obviously the way they develop the topic. Many of them take a few seconds to get into the topic, what to say next, and then the time is up, or they start very hesitantly and then pick up their ideas as the time is running out. So developing the ideas, have a plan, try and have a structure for their topics. Okay, and then obviously coherence, logical manner, sticking to the topic. A lot of them go off the topic very easily, and then they don't actually cover the points that are asked for. And that is very important. They must look in those preparation seconds. They must look at what is being asked, the points that are being asked. And then they can practice with everyday topics, family, friends, the environment. But included in that, they must also develop their vocabulary on the less common topics as well. And then this is where the combinations come in that I've mentioned in the previous 2 weeks of the listening and the reading integrated into the speaking. I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute. But obviously, tenses, vocabulary, idioms and synonyms are also very important, and idioms being used correctly. Sometimes they will learn a couple of useful idioms and use them in the wrong context or overuse them. The correct use of idioms is obviously important as well. Okay, so often the students feel that they can practice the other sections on their own, that they just need you to practice the speaking with them. If that's what they ask, that's what I do with them, especially if their level's very good, then we focus on speaking, but just check that that is what they need and they're not neglecting the other sections as well. And they need to, as I said just now, speak about a lot of different topics, a wide variety of topics. Okay, and they can do that. They're not just with you, but wherever they get an opportunity. Okay, I'm going to show you a sample of the speaking test. Okay, so this one, preparation time 15 seconds, response time 45 seconds. Now, what I do is, because I teach IELTS and Cambridge as well, these preparation times and response times are different in each test. So sometimes it's difficult to remember just off the top of your head which is which. So I make a note, 15 seconds, 45 seconds, so that I don't get it confused. So they are practicing with the correct time, because 15 seconds prep is very short, but it's just time for them to gather their thoughts. They can even write notes in 15 seconds, where to start. And that's where that plan of how to approach it comes in. And then they must fill the 45 seconds. Okay, so these 15 seconds prep, it's basic questions about a variety of different topics. These generally aren't the complicated topics. They're the easier day-to-day, what is your opinion, advantages, disadvantages. They're not very complicated topics. If there's time, we can look at some of the topics just now. These are pretty everyday, but always, they must always explain why. If it says, what is your opinion? Encourage them to always explain, as in all the English tests. And it's better for them to try and overfill the time than underfill. But in saying that, they must try and wrap it up slightly within the 45 seconds so they don't just get cut off. Try and have a whole 45-second beginning, end, and middle. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the second one, because this is the reading, listening, and then answering a question. Okay, so a minute to read. So I'm going to now let everybody read this passage and listen to the conversation, and then I'll show you the question after that. Okay, so you may read the passage now. Okay, I'm going to play the conversation. Listen to the conversation now.
Thank goodness the department has made changes to the way they assess group work. I had a nightmare last term with our geology project. I couldn't bear going through that again.
Why? What happened?
Well, there were 3 of us in the group. One guy worked really hard, but he didn't trust anyone else to do anything. He just wanted to do it all himself.
It sounds like you were freeloading.
Well, I wasn't. I offered up plenty of ideas, but he kept saying they were no good. In the end, I stopped trying and left it to him. The other guy was a waste of space. He didn't pull his weight at all. We barely saw him.
Did you get a good grade?
A reasonable one, considering how little work I did. But I'm sure I'd have done better if I'd been given the chance to say what I wanted.
Well, the new system should give you that opportunity.
Yeah, I hope so. Though I wish they'd abolish group work altogether. All this organization and communication is just a waste of time. It's got nothing to do with geology.
The man is not keen on group work. In his experience, group work was frustrating because another...
Oh, sorry, I let it run into the model answer a little bit. Sorry about that. Okay, so now, very important is that the student writes notes while they are listening to that lecture, so that when they ask the question, they can then compare the reading to the listening. It is often contradictory opinions between the reading and the listening. They often contradict each other, not always, but it seems to be in the majority of the cases that the conversation contradicts the opinion of the reading. Okay, but as I say, not always. I have seen cases where they've been a similar opinion, but it is often an opposite opinion. Okay, so after they've read that, listened, taken notes, then they will see the question. So the man expresses his opinion of group work. State and explain his opinion. So they've got to remember what that man's opinion of the group work was and compare his opinion with the opinion of the geology faculty. So this opinion here in the reading, they've then got to explain the difference. They've got 30 seconds to prepare and then speak for 60 seconds. Okay, so it's not bad 30 seconds prep, but the important fact is here that they've made notes during that conversation so that they remember what his opinion was and can compare it to the reading. Because if they can't remember all the details of what he thought, then it's going to be very difficult to then voice the differences. Okay, and to get their thoughts together quickly within 30 seconds to then discuss the difference and what his opinion is. That's quite difficult. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next. Sorry, oops. Okay, this is another one very similar, a bit of reading again. This is slightly more academic, the VAT theory, and then listening to the lecture and then explaining what that theory is, and the example used by the professor illustrates how the theory can be applied. So not many people know about a medical thing like this, like learning states. So that makes it very important that they've made notes when they're listening to the professor's conversation. Okay, and that also links to the speaking part 4. Okay, this lecture is longer and it is more difficult. It's not a conversation now, but a lecture about a particular topic. Okay, so then they ask, using the information from the talk, describe what we know about water on Mars and how we know it. So it's another fairly difficult topic. This is only 20 seconds prep and 60 seconds speaking. That's why I said just now, just make a little note for yourself of which section is which has how much prep and which section has how much speaking, so that you don't get confused, because it is difficult to remember which exactly is which. Okay, so if you can see it at a glance, what the prep time is and what the speaking time is. But the main idea in this speaking is for the students to express themselves using the correct vocabulary. And obviously, this is where the listening and the reading skills are very much integrated. Obviously, reading not with this, but with the previous ones. And you can see how those skills, especially if their listening is weak, as I said last week, it can pull down the speaking as well. Because for them to organize their ideas and express themselves in this short time, it is quite challenging. Okay, I hope that's given you a rough example of what each section looks like. The whole speaking section is only 20 minutes. So it's not long, but there are a lot of questions and a lot is expected. 6 questions, 2 independent. So only 2 of the independent and 4 integrated, combining that listening, reading, and speaking. And then question 1 and 2, as I said, just now 15 seconds, speaking 45 seconds. Question 3 to 6, preparation time 20 to 30 seconds, speaking for 60 seconds, and filling that time. Okay, let's have a quick look at the different type of questions. Okay, so personal experience questions, paired choice, do you prefer this or that? And then a lot of university matters. So because it's mostly students taking the TOEFL, it's very much university type questions. I think I mentioned that last week with the listening as well. Things about the library, about the university, as we heard a minute ago, about reorganization of certain things at the university. So it's not difficult, that section is not difficult, but it's remembering the details. Okay, and then the next part, the academic reading and culture. So that is where it does become a little bit more difficult with the text, with the lecture, and then providing a sensible answer. Okay, campus conversations, academic summaries. Okay, basically 1 minute to read, and then 2 minutes to listen and summarizing that information. As with the listening, the note-taking and remembering the details is very important. Okay. So the criteria, in the speaking, the criteria are very important because it's how they deliver their opinions, how they deliver their thoughts. Okay, the pace that they speak at. They mustn't speak too quickly. And obviously, all of us, when we're nervous, we speak faster than normal, but also they mustn't speak too slowly. They must practice speaking at a good pace and stay on the topic, as I said, and be precise. It's easy to waffle. I think we all waffle sometimes, but stay on the topic and speak at a good pace. I mentioned the vocabulary earlier. Also, simple and complex sentences. That also for next week when we do writing, the difference between simple, complex, compound sentences, also very important. Okay, and then the coherency, it must make sense. It must be good to listen to. A little bit of a sense of humor here and there, that seems to be fine, but because it's often an academic topic, it's more difficult to have the odd little bit of lightheartedness. But in the topics where they asked about everyday things, they can have a little bit of lightheartedness in between. And then when I mentioned the accent, I did mention pronunciation. Pronunciation is very important, but don't worry too much about the accent. And then intonation. It's not something I really thought about before I started teaching English tests. Different languages have different intonations. So when they are speaking, just listen to the intonations to make sure that it sounds natural, that their voice isn't rising and falling unnaturally. Okay, that's just a little extra tip. Okay, the key though is speaking as much as possible, because speaking actually helps all the other aspects as well. Definitely writing, expressing the ideas. The more they speak, the more confident they will become in expressing the ideas in writing. So it's all very much linked. And obviously, if they build their vocabulary, it will help their reading and they'll understand the listening better as well. So just a few popular independent questions. How did you deal with the pandemic? What's the most impressive moment in your life? Do you prefer to work in a group? So these are not very complex ones. Opinions, agree, disagree, description or explanation. Okay, and then some of those topics that I showed you a little bit earlier. So once again, I've gone through a lot of material very quickly. I hope it's all clear. It's been useful.